Hello, my name is Chris Godfrey. I'm a lecturer here at Alliance Manchester Business School. I teach on the Master's Level Portfolio Investment course. Following are some tutorials that I made for my students on how to use Bloomberg. Starting off with how to get set up on Bloomberg, how to look at stocks on Bloomberg, then moving on to how to set up a portfolio, and then how to do risk analysis inside Bloomberg. Hope you enjoy them.
Welcome to the Bloomberg Tutorials Part 1. In this section, we'll be investigating what Bloomberg is and what it is used for. Bloomberg LP is a financial information services company headquartered in New York. Bloomberg was founded in 1981 and is still majority owned by its founder, Michael Bloomberg, who was Mayor of New York from 2002 to 2013. Bloomberg's principal business line is the supply of its Bloomberg terminals and the information to which they provide access. Other business areas are Bloomberg News, a wire service, Bloomberg TV, a finance-focused TV channel, and magazines, Bloomberg Business Week and Bloomberg Markets. This is a typical setup for a Bloomberg terminal. A Bloomberg terminal runs as an application on a Windows computer and normally makes use of several screens. Although this terminal uses 2 screens, it's common to see up to 4 screens being used by a Bloomberg terminal. Each window has a distinctive and immediately recognizable black background and mostly orange and red screen fonts. The other immediately distinctive feature is the Bloomberg keyboard. The Bloomberg keyboard. Although a Bloomberg terminal can be operated using a conventional keyboard, it is most usual to see a Bloomberg keyboard such as this one attached to a Bloomberg terminal. It features an extra row of keys at the top which are used in trading environments. The yellow keys at the top are used a great deal in the operation of the terminal, as they specify the type of asset being used. Each Bloomberg terminal is connected to Bloomberg's global financial information system. A Bloomberg terminal provides access to live prices of a vast range of financial assets. Those that trade in the financial markets need to be able to observe prices which are absolutely up to date, and this makes a Bloomberg terminal a key tool in a professional trading environment. In some trading houses, each trader will have their own Bloomberg terminal. Bloomberg accomplishes this by integrating data from a very wide range of sources and making it available in an easily searchable form. Bloomberg News is an important source of news for the financial markets. Users of Bloomberg terminals can place a continuous feed of Bloomberg News on the screen. Since many traders will be sitting at Bloomberg terminals, this news feed is highly influential in moving markets. Bloomberg terminals allow traders to communicate with each other through Bloomberg messages. Many assets, for instance corporate bonds, convertible bonds, some government bonds, credit default swaps, loans, mortgage bonds and municipal bonds, are traded on an over-the-counter basis rather than being traded on an exchange. Bloomberg messaging allows traders to send details of their current price quotes to potential clients. Bloomberg also employs artificial intelligence methods in Bloomberg message mining to extract live prices from these Bloomberg messages and display them to users. One key function of Bloomberg, which you may well use in your coursework or dissertation projects, is Bloomberg's historical data. Do be aware that Bloomberg places monthly download limits on the amount of data that it is possible to download to Excel, which only resets at the end of the calendar month. For large bulk downloads of data, it may be better to use DataStream's Excel add-in. Company data on Bloomberg. One of Bloomberg's most powerful features is the ability to integrate all relevant financial information for a company. From a company's description screen, we can see all its share issues, its bonds, and any other securities it issues. We can also view the company's accounts and annual reports. We can also view data on the company's management. This makes Bloomberg a potent tool for company analysis and profiling. Analytical functions on Bloomberg. Bloomberg has a very large number of analytical functions, which you can use to analyze specific assets or user-defined portfolios. Despite their usefulness, few users make full use of these. Some hedge funds perform most of their risk analytics inside Bloomberg, however. We'll be using some of these on the course. We have Bloomberg terminals on the second floor of the Alliance Manchester Business School building, next to the library on the south side of the building. Note that although the building is closed from the outside around 6 p.m, in practice, postgraduate students are permitted to stay in the library and computer rooms through the evening. Students and researchers use Bloomberg for downloading historical data, using Bloomberg's analytic functions, and performing company analysis. Market participants use Bloomberg for its live news feed, viewing live prices, analysing their portfolios, communicating with market makers, and performing company analysis. Bloomberg Tutorials, Part 2. Starting up Bloomberg. First, log into the workstation using your university username and password. Click on the Start menu, go to All Programs and find the Bloomberg folder in the list of programs. Next, double-click on the link which installs the Bloomberg Excel add-in. Next, double-click on the Bloomberg icon to open it. Bloomberg will now open and will spawn a number of windows. If you're sitting at a terminal with a number of screens, move these around to suit your workspace. I've already logged into the workstation, so now I'm going to install the Bloomberg Excel add-in by going to the Start menu, All Programs, then to Bloomberg, then clicking on the Install Office add-in. Next, I'm going to click on Install, click on OK, and then finally close. Next, I'm going to start Bloomberg. I can either click on the Bloomberg icon or I can go to Bloomberg in the Start menu and click on the Bloomberg icon there. Next, Bloomberg will start. Introduction to Bloomberg, Part 3. Getting a Bloomberg login. You need a username and password to gain access to Bloomberg. The university Bloomberg computers have generic usernames and passwords attached to the machines. Alternatively, you can create your own username and password through the registration process. For this, you'll need a mobile phone. For the group project, we recommend that each group creates its own username and password. This allows you to create, store, and retrieve your own portfolios, which will be there the next time you log in, whichever workstation you use. So, having started up Bloomberg, I'm going to maximize the windows, and then click on Enter or Go to begin. And next, to get a new login, click on Create a new login. This now brings up an initial registration screen. Tick Myself and No. Next, put in your first name and last name. And Bloomberg will now suggest a login name though you can choose whichever one you please. It's important now to put in a mobile phone number, because Bloomberg will now send you an authentication code on this number. Next, you also need to put in your email, and once that field is complete, click on Next. On the next screen, you'll need to input the authentication code that you are sent. Bloomberg Tutorials Part 4. Logging in and initial setup. Once you have created your own login and password, use this to log into Bloomberg. Bloomberg will now start a number of windows, some of which we won't be using. Since I'm only going to be using one screen, I will need to close some of these, including the messaging windows and the news window. If you have a workstation with many screens, you can move these windows about onto different screens and then maximize them. So, on the Bloomberg login page, I'm going to enter my username and my password. And next I'm going to click on Login. Eventually, when the windows have finished loading, I see something like this. This window in front, which has appeared, is a conversation window. I don't need it, so I'm going to close it. Next, I'm going to close this window that has appeared in the corner. And now finally, I can see that I'm left with 4 Bloomberg windows. I can position these wherever I wish. I can put these on multiple monitors if I have them available. This is another unnecessary window which I'm going to close. So this is my first window. This is my second Bloomberg window. This is my third Bloomberg window. And this is my fourth Bloomberg window, which, when I maximize, is a news screen. This is regularly updated with important news for the financial markets.
Introduction to Bloomberg, Part 5. Searching for companies. The Bloomberg ticker. One easy way to look up a company is to type its name in the bar at the top of any screen. Then press the green Help or F1 button and then press Enter. This will bring up a list of securities matching the search string from which we can choose. Note that Bloomberg may give us many submenus to choose from, allowing us to refine our search to equities, bonds, options, etc., before showing us the individual securities. This is the Bloomberg keyboard, and this button here is the green F1 Help button. Every security on Bloomberg, that is, every equity, bond, option, etc., is uniquely identified by a Bloomberg ticker. For an equity index or exchange-traded fund, a ticker comes in 3 parts. The first usually consists of 4 characters, but can be more, and identifies the company itself. The second part, usually consisting of 2 characters, identifies the exchange on which the security is traded. When an equity has listings on more than one exchange, the first 4 characters normally stay the same, but the exchange code changes between listings. The third part identifies the type of asset and is entered using the yellow keys at the top of the keyboard. To specify an equity, we use the yellow equity or F8 key at the top of the keyboard. Bloomberg has an autocomplete function which suggests alternatives as we type, so we often don't need to type out the full name. And this is the yellow equity key at the top of the keyboard. For instance, to find Apple's primary equity listing, we would position the cursor in the bar at the top of the page, type Apple Help, and then press Enter. Bloomberg would then show us a list of options to choose from. Companies, that is, companies containing the word Apple. People, that is, executives who work for companies containing the word Apple. Intelligence, that is, reports on Apple the company and also on apples. Equities, that is, stocks, warrants, equity futures and options, etc. on companies containing the word Apple. Funds, that is, mutual funds whose name contains the word Apple. And finally, fixed income, that is, bonds whose name contains the word Apple. From the companies list, we can see that Apple's primary equity listing has the ticker AAPL-US, where AAPL denotes Apple Incorporated, and US indicates that it is listed on a US exchange. To call up this security within Bloomberg, we would type AAPL-US and then equity, entering equity by pressing the yellow equity or F8 key at the top of the keyboard. This would then bring up a menu of analysis functions that we could then use. Once again, here is the yellow F8 equity key. Likewise, to find BMW's primary equity listing, we would position the cursor in the bar at the top of the page, type BMW Help, and then press Enter. Bloomberg would then show us a list of options to choose from, but also intelligently shows us a summary for BMW AG, the main company. From the companies list, we can see that BMW's primary equity has the listing BMW GR. BMW denotes BMW AG, the company, and GR indicates that it is listed on a German exchange, in this case. To call up this security within Bloomberg, we would type BMW GR, then equity, using the equity F8 key at the top of the keyboard. Let's try this. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and in this bar at the top I'm going to type Apple, A-P-P-L-E, and then help using the F1 or help key, and then enter. And this now brings up a list. We can see here is the companies list. This is all companies which contain the word Apple.
people. This is people connected with companies containing Apple. Then down here in securities we have equities. These are all stocks which contain the word Apple. And funds, these are all mutual funds which contain the word Apple. Let's click on this equities menu here. From here we can see that it is suggesting AAPL US, which is Apple's main US listing. But also there is another company here, Apple Wealth Holdings in Bangkok, or Apple Hospitality Real Estate Investment Trust. And then down here we have some equity futures and some equity options on Apple. So this listing here, AAPL US, this is the main US listing for Apple. So we can click on this and this will give us the equity description page. Let's try it again for BMW. So we go to the top here and type in BMW and help. And as before, Bloomberg gives us what it thinks is its best guess of what we're looking for. So here we have a summary page for BMW. But if we wanted to find it the way we did it before, we could go and click on equities. And then here we have a list of companies which contain BMW in the name. So this BMW GR here is going to be its main listing. This is on another exchange. This is its London listing. And then we have some equity futures and some equity options. So now if I click on BMW GR, we will get the main listing.
Bloomberg Tutorials Part 6. The Bloomberg Security Description Function, DES. When we type in the name of an equity, Bloomberg displays the main menu of Bloomberg functions. The first function listed, marked DES, Security Description, is a useful place to start when looking at a security. We can call it by typing DES or clicking on the link. The DES page has a number of interesting summary statistics and tabs, and we can click on these to get more information.
In the Bloomberg setup, to call up the Apple main menu, I would type in AAPL US and then use the F8 equity key to specify equity, and then I would either click on the autocomplete suggestion or press enter. As you can see, this now brings up the main menu of Bloomberg functions, and the first one here is DES, Security Description. Let's click on this, and immediately we can see a very great number of statistics. Let's have a look around. This figure up here is the last price quoted in dollars. Here we have the change from this morning's close, so this tells us that Apple has gone down today. Up here we have the present quotes, so 215.44 versus 215.46. These are the lots of the shares which are being offered at each of those respective quotes. This is the time of the last trade. This is telling us that our feed is delayed by 15 minutes because we have here an academic subscription. If we wanted live, up-to-date information, this would cost considerably more. This is the daily volume. This tells us the number of shares that have been traded today. This tells us the opening price. This tells us the high price for today. This tells us the low price for today. And this gives us the total value of traded shares today. This is telling us that $6.545 billion worth of shares have so far been traded in Apple stock today. This section here tells us what its classification and its brief description is. Here we have a price chart. This is telling us what the 52-week high and the 52-week low are. This is giving us the year-to-date change. This is giving us the market cap in US dollars. This is telling us that it has a current market cap of $1,040 billion. That is, it is currently valued at more than $1 trillion. This is the number of shares. And here we have some estimates. Over here we have details on the management. And here we have its equity beta with regard to the S&P 500. Let's click on some of these links. Let's click first of all on the issue info at the top. That is tab number 2. This gives us more details as to this particular share's classifications. This tells us its SIC code, which is its industry classification. This tells us its ISIN, that is its international security number, its QSIP and its CDOL. QSIPs and CDOLs are other ways of identifying this security on an exchange. These give the most recent public offerings, and over here we have the top holders. This tells us that the main shareholders of Apple are first of all Vanguard Group with 7.2%, BlackRock with 6.45%, and Berkshire Hathaway with 5.36%. If I click on top holders again, this gives us even more details of the shareholders. To return to the previous screen, I can click on this back arrow up here in the top corner. I can do that once to return to the issue info page. Let's click on number 3, the ratios page. This is now telling us all sorts of different ratios for Apple stock. So here we have the price earnings ratio, the current market cap, the current enterprise value. Over here we have the price to cash flow value. And here we have some liquidity statistics, the current ratio and the quick ratio. Let's click on tab number 4. This is telling us accounting information for the past 5 years and forecast accounting information for next year. So this is looking at revenue and then at comparable earnings per share. Let's click on tab number 5, industry info. So here we have some comparable companies, LG Electronics, Samsung. Here we have some comparable company statistics, and we could click on those to get a better idea of the range within which its competitors are trading. Let's go back to the profile information on tab number 1. If I want to get more information on the price chart, I can click here on price chart. This then gives me a price chart window. Note that dates are specified in the American format, that is month, day and year, rather than day, month, year, as in the European format. Here I can specify various date ranges to examine. I can click on 1 month to look at returns for last month, or the last 6 months, or the year to date, or the last 1 year, or the last 5 years. If I have a custom date range, I could specify it by typing the start and end dates in these yellow boxes here. If I want to extract price information from this, I can do so by right-clicking. I can then go to Copy and Export Options, and then Copy Data to Clipboard. I can click on that, and then I can go to Excel, find a new tab, and then paste. And this now has transferred the numeric data behind the graph into this Excel spreadsheet.
Bloomberg Tutorials, Part 7. All about exchange-traded funds. What is an exchange-traded fund? It is a fund whose shares are traded on an exchange. By contrast, the shares of a mutual fund can normally only be bought from and redeemed with the issuing asset manager themselves. An ETF will often track a named index, so that an investor holding the ETF will experience the same return as the index demonstrates. Indices are usually defined by a specialist index company. The most famous are MSCI, FTSE Russell, and Standard & Poor's. MSCI offers regional indices, country indices, and factor indices. Notable regional indices are the MSCI Europe Index, the MSCI World Index, and the EAFE Index. These are then subdivided into country indices, for instance, the MSCI UK Index or the MSCI France Index. They offer a number of important factor indices, for example, the Quality Index, their World Momentum Index, or the World Value Index. They also offer regional variations of these factor indices additionally. FTSE Russell are best known for their FTSE 100, FTSE 350 and FTSE All-Share indices. They also offer a number of well-known US indices, including the Russell 1000, 2000 and 3000 indices. Standard & Poor's are best known for their S&P 500 and S&P 1500 indices. You can't normally invest directly in an index. MSCI and FTSE Russell only specify the composition of the index on a regular basis. Index providers make their money by selling the regular updates on the composition of their indices. Instead, we rely upon ETF providers to manufacture a fund which will track an index and which will then list the shares. For instance, if you wanted to gain exposure to the S&P 500 index, you could invest in the SPDR S&P 500 ETF with ticker SPY, or the iShares Core S&P 500 ETF with ticker IVY, or you could invest in the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF with ticker VOO. Here, SPDR, iShares and Vanguard are the ETF providers. How do we ensure that the value of an ETF tracks its underlying index? Specialist financial institutions, called authorized participants, are able to make units of an ETF from its constituent stocks and sell it on the open market. Alternatively, they are able to buy an ETF unit and then disassemble it into its constituent securities. If the price of an ETF goes above the value of its constituent stocks, an authorized participant will make an ETF from its constituent stocks and sell it for the higher price, profiting from the difference and reducing the ETF price. If the price of an ETF goes below the value of its constituent stocks, an authorized participant will buy an ETF on the open market, disassemble it into its constituent stocks, and sell them, profiting from the difference, and so raising the ETF price. What are the desired properties of an ETF? An ETF should therefore have a value which closely tracks the value of its underlying index. It should also be liquid. That is, it should be capable of being bought and sold in size without affecting the price. It should also be cheap to trade. That is, it should have a low bid-ask spread and a low expense ratio. How do ETF providers manufacture an ETF? One method is full replication. In this method, the ETF provider purchases every constituent security of the index in its correct proportion and adjusts this continually as the composition of the index changes over time. This involves regular rebalancing and increased transaction costs. These ETFs also tend to contain cash and index futures as part of the rebalancing operation. Optimized ETFs seek to purchase a representative set of securities to approximate to the composition of the index while minimizing transaction costs. Some use derivatives to mirror the index. We will tend to get different results between the different methods when we look at their constituent stocks on Bloomberg. The full replication ETFs will include cash and index futures in their constituents, and this may make the interpretation of their composition a little harder. The derivative ETFs will usually display only the constituent stocks, but no cash or index futures. So we will tend to get cleaner results by using these. In the group coursework project, we recommend using derivative type ETFs wherever possible for this reason. How to find an ETF on Bloomberg. Firstly, type in the name, for instance MSCI Europe, and then press Help or the F1 key. Next, look under the list of funds. Note that we want an ACC fund. These reinvest all dividends and so represent a total return index. By contrast, the funds marked DIST distribute all their dividends rather than reinvesting them, and we don't want these. The correct funds can be difficult to find, so a suggested list is in the benchmark suggested ETF spreadsheets and the other spreadsheets recommending country and industry ETFs. Things to look for in the Bloomberg ETF description page. Firstly, look for the underlying index. This tells us what the ETF is tracking. The price tracking error is the annualized tracking error between the underlying index and the price of the ETF. The net asset value tracking error is the annualized tracking error between the underlying index and the ETF's net asset value. It is normally much lower than the price tracking error, since the composition is managed to exactly match that of the underlying index.
Now, let's have a look at how this works on Bloomberg. So, at the top bar of Bloomberg, I'm going to type in the name of an index. In this case, I'm going to look for the MSCI Europe index. Now I'm going to press F1 or help. And now under the funds menu, this will show me all funds with the word MSCI and Europe in the name. I'm interested in ETFs, so I will click on this bar up here, which will then expand LN. Let's click on that. And then go to DES, Security Description. So this is an iShares MSCI Europe fund issued by iShares. It's labelled ACC, hence it reinvests the dividends, which is what we desire. In the characteristics section, we can see what the underlying index is. This is labelled MSDEE15N, and this is the MSCI Europe index, which I can see if I click through. To return to the previous screen, I'm going to click on the back arrow in the top left-hand corner. Here we have the price tracking error of 0.89 and the NAV tracking error, which is much less as we expected, which is 0.076. In this corner here we can see that the replication strategy is labelled as being full replication. If I go to the graph, then I can see that the graph of the price mirrors almost exactly that of the underlying index. These figures down here tell me that the total market cap of this fund is 698 million euros, and this tells me here that the bid-ask spread is 0.03, hence it's very low. Next, I'm going to have a look at an ETF for the same index, but which relies upon a derivative strategy, and that is the Amundi MSCI Europe ETF. It has ticker CEUGGY. Then I'm going to put in F8 or the yellow equity key, and then choose the security description. And this shows me that the underlying index is the same, but that the replication strategy is now labelled as being derivatives. Bloomberg Tutorials Part 8. Using the PRTU function to build portfolios. The PRTU function allows us to construct user-created portfolios. We can then perform analysis of the portfolios we have created using the PORT function. Any portfolios you create using PRTU will remain on the Bloomberg system between sessions and will be available to you next time you log in using your group's username. The following example demonstrates the creation of a portfolio containing only the benchmark used in the Portfolio Investment Coursebook project, that is, the MSCI Europe Index. We can't gain access to the composition of the MSCI Europe Index itself directly through Bloomberg, since MSCI provides this information only for a fee, and we would require an extra subscription to access it. However, we can assume that an ETF which tracks the index will have a composition which is exactly the same as, or almost exactly the same as, the index. The following section therefore creates a portfolio which consists of some units of the Amundi MSCI Europe ETF. since we can assume that this has the same composition at all times as the index. This ETF uses a derivatives method of replication, so it won't contain cash or index futures when we examine its composition later on. The ETF's ticker is CEUGGY followed by equity. So inside Bloomberg, I'm going to go to the menu bar and type in PRTU. And this will get me to my menu of portfolios that I've already created. I can create a new portfolio by going to 1, Create, now the dialog box invites me to give my portfolio a name. I'm going to put in Benchmark 1. I'm going to change the portfolio currency to Euros, and on this occasion I'm not going to select a benchmark. Then I go to 1, Create at the bottom, and this now gives me a screen into which I can enter the assets I wish to put in my portfolio. The first thing that I'm going to do is to change the date. Bloomberg allows us to create a portfolio with assets added in at any point in historic time. So I'm going to choose the date of the 1st of February 2018, which in Bloomberg format will be 02/01/2018. Next, in this box here, I'm going to type in the asset name or the asset ticker that I want. So that is going to be CEUGGY, and we notice that Bloomberg has an autocomplete function which allows me to select it. I now need to specify the number of units of this asset that I desire. I'm going to put in 100 units, and Bloomberg is telling me that on this date the asset price was €219.40, so that my portfolio now has a value of €21,940. Next I'm going to click on Save. After this, if I wanted to add more assets, I could do so by entering them in here. As it is, I'm happy, so I can now return to the previous menu by clicking on the back arrow in the top left hand corner. To go back into that, I would click on the asset name, and that would enter me in like so. To go back, I click on the back arrow, and from there I can investigate any other portfolio that I've chosen. Bloomberg Tutorials Part 9. Using the PORT function to analyse holdings. We can analyse portfolios we have created in the PORT function. To analyse portfolio holdings, we use the Holdings tab. Now, let's go to Bloomberg and go into the PORT menu. That gets me into this screen here, which is the port function window. I can use this box here to select any portfolio that I've created. So I can go to click on More Sources, and this allows me to select either the portfolios that I've already created, or benchmarks, or other indices, or other funds. But in this case, I'm going to select my benchmark one that I've created previously. Then I'm going to click on the select, and this now allows me to perform analysis. If I click on funds, I'm going to see that it consists only of holdings in this particular ETF, which is as it should be. So, to review the composition, I'm going to go to Holdings, and then I'm going to set the date in this corner to the date on which I set it up, which is the 1st of February 2018. So that is 02/01/2018. To see inside this, I need to go to Settings and then click on Portfolio Look-Through. This will enable me to view not only the fund itself but also the constituent assets. I now have to wait a little while for the page to refresh. This now is showing me the industry breakdown of the fund. If I wanted to see other breakdowns, I could click on this drop-down box here. If I select None, this will show me all of the constituent assets. If I select one country of domicile, this will give me an analysis by country of domicile of the constituent companies. If I select Exchange, this will give me an analysis by the country of listing of the various constituent assets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select country of domicile, and now after a wait, Bloomberg is now showing me the breakdown of this portfolio by country of domicile. Notice that there are some non-European countries listed here, for instance Chile. If I click on Chile, this tells me that the Chilean company which is included is Antofagasta plc. This arises because there is a difference between the way that MSCI classifies constituents countries and the way that Bloomberg classifies constituents countries. MSCI regards Antofagasta here as being a UK company because it is listed in the UK on the London Stock Exchange. Bloomberg here is listing it as a Chilean company because its corporate headquarters are in Chile. When we come to compare the difference between the MSCI country allocation and the Bloomberg country allocation, we will need to take account of some of these differences. Likewise, if we go to South Africa, we see that Investec plc is listed by Bloomberg as being a South African company. MSCI classifies Investec as being a British company because most of its businesses are in the UK and also because it is listed in the UK on the London Stock Exchange. It therefore forms part of the MSCI UK index. If I want to capture this and save it for later use, I can do so by going to Actions, Generate Report, and then click on Current tab. So that is Actions, Generate Report, and then Current tab. This will now produce an Excel spreadsheet of this page, which will then arrive in the form of a Bloomberg email. The note in the top corner now tells me that my Bloomberg mail has arrived. To view this, I will go to another window and I will select Mail, M-A-I-L, and this now is the spreadsheet that I've requested in the form of a Bloomberg message. I can now click on that, and that now downloads into an Excel spreadsheet. I can now save this for further analysis. Let's return to the initial spreadsheet. If I want to view the individual constituents, then I would click on this drop-down box here and select None. This now will give me all individual constituents of the index. Once again, if I wish to save this for later use, I can go to Actions, Generate Report, Current tab XLS, and then wait for Bloomberg to generate the message and then send the spreadsheet to me in the form of a Bloomberg message. I now have a notification that I've received a Bloomberg mail, so I go to another window and now here is my new Bloomberg mail, and this is my new report spreadsheet.
Bloomberg Tutorials Part 10. Benchmark Risk Analysis. We can analyse the risk of the benchmark by creating a portfolio which consists of units of an ETF which tracks the benchmark. Next, in the PRTU menu, we use the Tracking Error Volatility tab. Then we select Summary on the next level down. Settings. We need to make sure that the date is set to the start date of the project. We need to make sure the horizon is set to 1 year to get annualized standard deviation measures. We need to go to Settings and tick Portfolio Look-Through to make sure that the constituent securities are being analysed, not just the ETF. We also want to look at the annualized risk, labelled STD, for standard deviation. We need to look at total risk, factor, non-factor risk, afterwards factor risk broken down into country, industry, style and currency, industry risk broken down into its components, which I'm going to term the first level of detail, currency risk broken down into its components. We can also get more detail in each of these by clicking on the number in the table, which will display a bar chart at the bottom of the table. It's the first level of detail for the industry risk that should be reported in the project report. That is, risk broken down into the 10 GICS industries. In the case of industry and style bar charts, clicking on the green bars will then reveal a second level of detail. The simplest way of getting the data out is simply to copy the figures down by hand. The figures for the bar charts can only be viewed by hovering the cursor over them. There is no way of displaying them on screen in a table. There is a way of creating a spreadsheet report, but it's complicated. We need to go to Actions, Create, Edit Templates, then go to Create, and next follow the steps shown in the demonstration. Note that the risk figures that this generates relate to the second level of detail, not to the first level of detail on the previous slide.
First of all, I'm going to load up the Portfolio menu. Next, I need to specify the portfolio that I'm interested in looking at. In this case, it is the Benchmark 1 portfolio. If I wanted to view others, then I could go to More Sources. As it is, I'm happy with Benchmark 1. Next, the system is asking me to define
a portfolio to compare this against. We'll use this in the next section, but at the moment I don't want to compare this benchmark against anything. So I will select default, none. Next, I need to go to the Tracking Error Volatility tab. And I also need to remember to set Portfolio Look-Through on. So I'm going to go to Settings, and then I'm going to click on Portfolio Look-Through to make sure that the individual securities are being analysed and not just the ETF. Next, I want to choose the Summary tab within Tracking Error and Volatility. Finally, I need to change the date of the analysis to the starting date of the portfolio, which in this case is the 1st of February 2018. So I key in 02/01 2018. I see that the horizon is set to 1 year, so that is as it should be. Now finally on this screen we can see the elements which we desire to retrieve. We first of all have total risk. This indicates that the annualized standard deviation of the benchmark is 11.68%. Breaking this down one level further, we see that this breaks down into factor risk, accounting for 11.64% on an annualized standard deviation basis, and non-factor or idiosyncratic risk of 0.92%. This shows that the benchmark is very well diversified, seeing as the non-factor risk accounts for such a small percentage of the overall risk. Next, we can break it down one level further, where we get to country, industry, style, and currency risk. To get more detail on the factor risk arising from industry, we can click on the figure in the table corresponding to it, in this case 0.93. And this will display in the bar chart below the risk attributable to the top 10 GICS industries, that is, excluding real estate. Then, hovering over with the mouse cursor, we can see that the annualized standard deviation arising from financials is 1.24, from healthcare is 0.84, from energy is 0.71. You might wonder why some of these are greater than the total figure, which is 0.93. This is probably due to covariances between these, which reduce the overall impact of industry risk. Sadly, there is no way to extract these figures in a table by themselves. If you wish to note down these figures to put in the project report, we will need to do this simply by hovering over with the mouse and then writing them down.